So, folks, there is a man named Matt Walsh, and he is absolutely shocked and flabbergasted. Shocked and flabbergasted, I tell you. Someone might receive consequences for the words that they choose to use towards others in public, specifically children. Well, let's take a look. How is he feeling about this?
Rochester is going to prison Shiloh Hendrix for saying nasty things to some Somalis in a park. They saw the words offensive language and thought they had a case. Preposterous. If you can bring yourself to think back to the Obama years, you'll remember that the so-called religious right was relentlessly mocked for making various predictions that, in the eyes of enlightened liberals, couldn't possibly come to pass. The religious right said that Roe v. Wade was not an infallible decision and that it could be overturned. They said gay marriage was an abomination that would pave the way for various forms of child abuse, including the evil of transgenderism. They said religious freedoms would be suspended and that LGBT activists would use the power of government to force Christians to violate their deeply held beliefs. They said that abortion would give rise to a broader culture of death where euthanasia became commonplace, especially in godless places like Canada and California. All of these predictions, of course, have turned out to be right on the money.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, exactly. Hey, you remember when people were saying Obama was going to put people in the Hobbit homes? Like FEMA was going to roll in and just put people in holes in the ground to live in, little dirt hovels? We all remember when that happened for real. And now we are cursed with the mole people living underneath America, every day chipping away at the very foundations of this great country. The goddamn mole people.
Everyone, regardless of their political affiliation, can see that now. The religious right is owed an apology by many, many people.
But not from me. Specifically, they actually owe me an apology.
But there's one prediction of the religious right, one that was endlessly derided for pretty much the entirety of Barack Obama's presidency, that still gets a very bad rap, even though it was also an accurate prediction. And I'm talking about the alleged moral panic about the possibility that Democrats would soon implement a variant of Sharia law in the United States.
Oh my God. Okay. I would never in a million years have predicted that this is where he was going to take this. This is so comically silly.
Now, surely we were told thousands of times this was a classic example of bigotry and Islamophobia. Barack Obama is supposedly a Christian, after all. How could he or anyone else possibly transform America's legal system into something resembling the Islamic legal code?
Oh, yeah.
That was a conspiracy theory, the fact checkers told us. It was a lie concocted by Fox News to brainwash older voters who don't know any better. Mm-hmm. Even today, many conservatives still hold this view. For many self-described members of the right, it's still unthinkable that America's legal system, easily the most durable and functional system in the West, could one day look a lot like the Sharia courts in, say, Mogadishu.
Uh-huh. Just out of curiosity, one of the things that I am constantly baffled by, right, is the idea that, like, Sharia law exists in the American Midwest. Like, how washed do you have to be like, yes, you know, when we accepted refugees from Somalia, they recreated Somalia's legal system in Minnesota. How? Through what mechanism? And also, what laws did they get passed to make the Midwest laws as applied in Minnesota or the city of Rochester or wherever? What laws were passed to make it Sharia law? I would love to know. Something tells me, I have a sneaking suspicion, that Matt Walsh is going to explain none of those things.
Now, the problem is that for reasons that were never fully explained to the American public, we have imported hundreds of thousands of Somalis into the United States.
Well, actually, the reasons were explained pretty clearly. And, for example, here in Minnesota, we approved to accept refugees here. Our elected government approved that. And we have, by and large, liked that. Because we're not assholes.
And when you're talking about numbers that large, then inevitably, transformation will occur. This transformation won't simply involve the construction of mosques, the establishment of Somali sporting leagues, the commencement of regular Islamic celebrations in the streets and all that.
Yeah, and you know what's going to happen next weekend? There's going to be a Greek fest. Oh no, are we importing too many Greeks to America? Oh no, they're going to have a festival celebrating the Greek Orthodox Church and Greek cuisine and culture. They're probably even going to play Greek music in the streets of Minneapolis. Oh no! The Greek invasion. They're going to take over our entire legal system with their Hellenistic values. Oh no. But somehow, like, Matt Walsh never talks about that. You know? No, he doesn't talk about that. I wonder why. It's because he's a racist.
Will also involve the implementation of a new legal system, one that has absolutely nothing in common with any Western tradition.
Hey, how is that imported, Matt? How exactly would one go about importing that? I'm very curious how one would overturn the entirety of US jurisprudence in order to implement an entirely different legal system. I'm just curious.
Less our own. And indeed, that's exactly what is taking
Again, Matt Walsh's content only appeals to morons who aren't going to actually ask questions.
Place in Minnesota, one of America's largest states. In Minnesota, America's system of laws is now effectively defunct. It has been replaced, as the religious right had warned, with a primitive and oppressive legal code that is far more in common with Sharia law than anything the founders put in writing.
Okay, and are you going to use any specifics here whatsoever? I'm really curious, actually.
And if that sounds like hyperbole, well, ask yourself this. When you saw the story of Shiloh Hendricks a few months ago, what did you think would happen to her? Now, in case you've forgotten, in April, shortly after 6 p.m., Shiloh Hendricks was at a park in Rochester, Minnesota with her 18-month-old son. And that's when another boy around the age of 8 went rummaging through her diaper bag and removed an applesauce pouch from it. Eventually, Shiloh Hendricks chased the boy down, retrieved her property.
By the way, that boy had special needs, and this lady just kept screaming racial slurs about him and at him. So, I don't know. That seems pretty fucking weird to me. Like, for a grown-ass woman to be chasing down, like, a child on the spectrum,
just did the research.
Screaming slurs.
She's being charged with disorderly conduct for drunkenly screaming slurs at a child. That's perfectly legal.
Don't spoil the segment, Nomi Sunrider. We're getting there. We're getting there. But thank you for the $5 super chat.
Though not before she uttered, apparently, a few racial slurs. And that's when a Somali man, who was also there, started filming. Now, we'll play some of this just as a refresher, although...
because he understood that a woman drunkenly yelling slurs at a child is probably something that needs to be documented for the future court case.
Slurs will be censored. And, of course, you've already seen this video, but here it is again.
You call him a child? Did you call the child the word? It is my own business. You call him a... Okay, why don't you have the boss to say it right now again? Alright, that's...
You don't go digging through people's
Nobody digging into your...
A little kid just did, you dumbass.
That little kid, you call him...
Yeah.
The little child?
What if he acts like one, he's gonna...
Are you about to hit him? You chase him here?
He took my son's stuff.
So that gives you the right to call the child 5-year-old an N-word.
If that's what he's gonna act
That's
like.
what you're gonna call him.
That's what he's gonna act like.
You know, that's a hate speech. And you can be for that.
I don't give...
Huh. Okay, we'll see about that, what the internet has to say about you.
Again, when you saw this story back in April, what did you think would happen to Shiloh Hendricks? There were really only two options that anybody considered. The first possibility was that Shiloh would be canceled.
Well, obviously, I assumed that she was going to be tried in the Sharia court of Rochester, Minnesota. As we all know, here in Minnesota, if you go down to Rochester, you better be expecting some Sharia law, or as we like to call it here in Minnesota, some Sharia justice.
Sold by the outraged mob. Her life would be destroyed for saying a few naughty words in frustration. The other possibility was that...
I love how desperate Matt Walsh is to downplay this. Like, Bro, if you're that desperate to downplay this, join her in solidarity. Just say the N-word on camera a few times. Stand in solidarity with her, okay? You think it's no big deal. Like, live your values. Just a few naughty words.
Conservatives would do the
like he uses the same phraseology that like someone would use about like a 3-year-old saying the word butt.
right thing and fight back. They'd raise hundreds of thousands of dollars for Shiloh and send a very clear message that cancellation campaigns don't work anymore. That's not because conservatives support the use of bad language in public parks.
That's 100% what it's about, though. Like, Matt Walsh, you support that. You support this woman saying the N-word. You support that. And you support it even harder because she used it against someone who you view as a valid target of vitriol. Right? Like, that's why he's like this, right? And let's also be real here. He likes it.
Or they support using racial slurs. It's because the right to freedom of speech is paramount. And also people are tired of these cancellation mobs. And the only way to take power away from them is to respond in that way. What no one seriously expected, because it would be too preposterous, is that government officials in Minnesota would attempt to throw Shiloh in prison. I mean, after all, in the United States, we have something that Somalia doesn't have. We have a First Amendment, and the First Amendment prevents the government from arresting American citizens for saying bad words. And that includes racial slurs. It includes speech that most people find highly offensive. We aren't Canada. We're not North Korea. So unless you're threatening...
Yeah, it's not like there would be any laws against, say, following and screaming racial slurs at a child in a public park. That's totally legal, and no one can do anything about it in Matt Walsh's world.
To murder someone or assault them, which Shiloh wasn't doing, then you won't be prosecuted. That's how things work in the United States. That's all.
Like, I'm sorry. Can we just like pause for a second and like imagine a world where what Matt Walsh is saying was true, right? In his world, you as an adult have the right to follow a child around a park and call them racial slurs and swear at them with foul language, call them racial slurs, etc. Like in Matt Walsh's world, there is nothing wrong, or rather, there's nothing illegal. There's nothing the legal authorities can do if someone were to follow his children around the park screaming racial slurs at them. That doesn't sound right? Like, that sounds like maybe this is not the case, and that there are actually laws that may in fact bar someone from doing that. Seems like it. Seems like it.
Things have always worked here. So how could anyone put Shiloh Hendricks in handcuffs over this? Well, that would have been a reasonable question, say, 20 years ago.
Oh, damn. You know, I'm thinking 20 years ago would have been 2005. Why is that important? Well, I'm going to ask you all to keep the year 2005 in your head. Keep the year 2005 in your head. Keep it in mind. We're going to come back to that year in a hot minute.
Quick thought experiment. What do you think Matt Walsh would think if, say, a black woman used her freedom of speech to tell a kid to off?
I mean, I think Matt Walsh would also say that's a fine use of freedom of speech, but I think he would feel very differently if that black woman were like following his kids and screaming at them. But, you know.
But a lot has changed since then. And most notably, large portions of the state of Minnesota, practically speaking, are no longer part of the United States. More than 100,000 residents of Minnesota speak Somali.
Damn, that's crazy. And like, surely there are only like 200,000 people who live in Minnesota, right? Surely there are like, you know, more than 50% of Minnesota is now Somali, right? Oh, wait. Oh, it's actually 100,000 people would actually be 1/58th of the state. So that is that's less than 2% of the state population. And in his mind, huge swaths of the country of Minnesota are dominated by the Somali immigrants, the Somali scourge. And it's just like, yeah, it's like 1.7% of the Minnesota population. The city of Rochester is 70% white. And he's trying to talk about it like it's some kind of like enclave of Mogadishu. It's crazy, dog. The amount of racism coursing through this man's veins would kill your average human being.
There's so many Somalis in Minnesota that they hold their own Independence Day celebrations.
Hey, fun fact. There are so many of all kinds of different groups in Minnesota that they all hold their own Independence Day celebrations as well. You know, like the Greeks, or the Polish, or the Norwegians, or the Swedish, or the Germans, or the Irish, or the Scottish. There are so many fucking different groups of people who just have little street festivals and street fairs, and it's delightful.
They're electing public officials who explicitly promise to work on behalf of Somalia rather than Americans. And now,
citation needed.
They're carrying over the great Somali legal tradition as well, which means, among other things, no freedom of speech.
Okay.
If you upset Somalis in Minnesota, then they're going to try to put you in jail.
Uh-huh.
And that is why yesterday the city of...
And Rochester's legal system is all controlled by Somali agents working on behalf of Mogadishu? In Matt Walsh's world? Like, in Matt Walsh's world, that's how this works? I want him to, like, sketch out, like, go full Glenn Beck, put up a whiteboard and sketch out how you think this works, man.
Rochester, Minnesota, announced that it plans to bring criminal charges against Shiloh Hendricks.
Uh-huh.
This is directly from the city's website. Quote, the Rochester City Attorney's Office is filing a complaint summons stemming from the April 28th, 2025 incident that occurred at Roy Sutherland Park, playground at Soldiers Field Park. The draft complaint charges Shiloh Hendricks with 3 counts of disorderly conduct under Minnesota statute 609.72, a misdemeanor level charge with a maximum of 90 days in jail and or a $1,000 fine. Yes, the city of Rochester is going to attempt to imprison Shiloh Hendricks for saying nasty things to some Somalis in a park, including a child who stole her property and a Somali man who began harassing her afterwards and putting her on camera.
So he was harassing her for her screaming racial slurs at people in a park? Like, I'm sorry, if you don't get to say someone's harassing the person who went to a park to scream racial slurs at people. Like, they're they're not being harassed for being, like, this is honestly a crazy inversion that makes no sense to me. Yeah, if you're in a park screaming obscenities at children and someone pulls out a phone to, like, record you, they are not harassing you. You're the one disrupting the peace, having conduct that might be considered disorderly.
Because of that, Shiloh is supposedly guilty of disorderly conduct.
See, that's another interesting thing that gives an insight into the conservative mind right here. Because, number one, innocent until proven guilty, right? Like, Matt Walsh here is saying, they're saying she's guilty, and, like, yeah, they're charging her with disorderly conduct. 3 counts of disorderly conduct. They will have to prove that in a court of law, because that's how our system works. I'm just kind of, like, sitting here, like, this is, like, a complete misunderstanding of how the American legal system works. This is a complete, like, bastardization of, like, the actual facts on the ground of these stories. Like, it is bizarre. It is bizarre, and if you know anything about anything he's talking about, utterly deranged.
And in an attempt to explain these charges, the mayor of Rochester, Kim Norton, put out the following statement. And as I read this, we'll put an image of this mayor up on the screen. If you're a podcast listener, if you're listening to the audio, well, it's you know, she looks exactly as you would imagine.
Wait a minute. Matthew Walsh, you were telling us that the city of Rochester is living under the thumb of Sharia law. Now, I don't know about you, but Matt, this does not look like the kind of woman who's enforcing Sharia law. Matthew, this, what are you talking about? Oh yeah, this very average-looking Midwestern white liberal mom is absolutely like the vanguard of Sharia law here in the States. What are you talking about, you deranged racist fuck?
But here is the statement, quote, this was a situation that deeply affected many people, especially our communities of color, and caused real turmoil in our community. We acknowledge the lasting impact this incident has had, not only on those directly involved and across our community, but also in the broader conversations happening at the state and national level. These moments remind us of the complexity and far-reaching impacts of situations like this. The city,
Yeah, as we all know, every white woman is an agent of Sharia law now.
remains committed to staying engaged and proceeding with transparency and care, continuing efforts that support accountability and progress in Rochester. Now, meanwhile, the city added that, quote, this matter involved a large amount of evidence and required careful consideration of potential charging options across multiple offices. As the legal process moves forward, the city recognizes not only the significant attention and emotion surrounding this case, but also the complex and lasting impact situations like this have on communities of color and our broader community. If you're a homeowner, you need to listen to this. In today's
You want to be a homeowner? Don't move to Minnesota with all their Sharia law up in there.
Hendricks is being prosecuted for political reasons. By their own admission, the city was concerned about the attitudes of various demographic groups before deciding whether to bring a criminal case. Specifically,
Well, no, they were looking at the evidence and the charging options, because I'm fairly sure that the question at hand about what to charge Shiloh Hendrix with was related to whether or not to go with multiple counts of disorderly conduct or to go for a harder harassment charge. Harassment being a more serious charge than disorderly conduct. And they ultimately went with the slightly less serious disorderly conduct charges because they're easier to prove in a court of law, essentially.
we're worried about what Somalis thought, and because Somalis were deeply offended, they've decided to suspend the First Amendment effectively in Rochester.
Actually, no, not at even a little bit, actually, at all. And we'll talk about that in a moment.
Now, before we get into the specifics of the criminal complaint, which is even more of a farce than you're already imagining, it needs to be said that as quickly as possible, Shiloh Hendricks should file a federal civil rights lawsuit against the city of Rochester. The mayor, Kim Norton, should be arrested in the same way that Douglas Mackey was jailed by the Biden administration. You remember that case? They charged Douglas Mackey with committing a conspiracy against rights, meaning that he supposedly conspired to infringe on the right to vote by making a meme. Well, Kim Norton is actually engaging in a much more obvious conspiracy against rights. She's openly admitting that she's attempting to eliminate the First Amendment rights of women like Shiloh Hendricks.
That's actually not what's happening here. And Matt Walsh might know that if he looked up the actual charges that are at play. Specifically, let's just take a look here at what she is being charged with. Shiloh Hendricks is being charged with disorderly conduct. Now, what does that mean? Well, essentially, if you are engaging in an act like fighting in public, you throwing some punches in public, or like you're disturbing like a city council meeting, or you are like in a restaurant and you're just screaming obscenities at the top of your lung, or if you are, and I'm just going to quote this here from Sheridan and Doulis, PA, attorneys at law, engaging in offensive, obscene, or abusive language that incites anger, alarm, or violence, whether on public or private property. That can also constitute disorderly conduct. And I have to say, here are a couple of examples that Sheridan and Dulles give. A heated argument in a restaurant that escalates into shouting and disturbs others. Playing excessively loud music at 2 a.m. that disrupts neighbors' sleep. Publicly using abusive language towards someone in a way that incites them to respond with aggression. Like, say, calling a child the N-word and following them around a park. That might, in fact, very solidly fall under disorderly conduct. Now, Matt Walsh, of course, says, like 20 years ago, we didn't have this problem. And, well, that's a bit difficult, considering that, well, the disorderly conduct statute in Minnesota was passed back in 1994. So that might be a bit difficult. Because in 2005, the 20 years ago that Matt Walsh is talking about, this statute had already been on the books for almost a decade. So, yeah. Crazy.
Hey, I found your channel when Mehdi Hassan debate was happening. Love your work and your lives are awesome. Keep it up and stay awesome. Lots of love.
Christians Against Dinosaurs, thank you for the €5. I appreciate it. Personal anecdote, used to live in a Midwestern city, and when a hateful white fundy church posted threats against our South Asian church for how we dressed in Indian clothing, the Somali imam and Muslim neighbors came to the next few services to make sure we were safe, and some haters did come by to start shit, but we made those losers back down. Yeah, like, I don't know, like, Muslim folks in the Midwest have been nothing but lovely to me my entire life. Even when I was like growing up in like as a fundamentalist Christian, like the Muslim community out here is genuinely really welcoming and kind. Very, very chill. And it enrages me to see this man like just absolutely be the lowest tier scumbag racist about them.
It becomes extremely obvious when you look at this criminal complaint. We'll put that up on the screen here. These are the 3 counts. They're all the same, but they all apply to separate, quote, victims. And here's what they say, quote, on or about April 28, 2025, within the city of Rochester, Shiloh Hendrix, while in a public or private place and knowing or having reasonable grounds to know that it would or would tend to alarm, anger, disturb others, or provoke an assault or a breach of the peace, did wrongfully and unlawfully engage in offensive, obscene, abusive, boisterous, or noisy conduct, or in offensive, obscene, or abusive language that would reasonably tend to arouse alarm, anger, or resentment in others.
Yeah, that's pretty like textbook disorderly conduct.
Yeah, saying something that other people resent is a crime now.
Yeah, I'm gonna read the specific statute here. Crime. Whoever does any of the following in a public or private place, including on a school bus, knowing or having reasonable grounds to know that it will or will tend to alarm, anger, or disturb others or provoke an assault or breach of the peace, is guilty of disorderly conduct, which is a misdemeanor. 1. Engages in brawling or fighting. Or 2. Disturbs an assembly or meeting, not unlawful in its character. Or 3. Engages in offensive, obscene, abusive, boisterous, or noisy conduct, or in offensive, obscene, or abusive language tending reasonably to arouse alarm, anger, or resentment in others. And like pretty textbook, like saying the N-word is going to check those boxes. Also, caregiver, penalty for disorderly conduct. A caregiver, as defined in section 609.232, who violates the provisions of subdivision 1 against a vulnerable adult as defined, must be sentenced to imprisonment for not more than 364 days or to payment of a fine of not more than $3,000 or both. And understand that, like, Matt Walsh is complaining about the fact that, like, being charged with this crime, right? Being charged with disorderly conduct. Like, I'm sorry, if you're in a park and you scream the N-word at a child, like, that's textbook disorderly conduct. But also, when you're charged with that, it's not a guarantee that you're going to get all 90 days in prison or in jail or, you know, the full $1,000 fine. But when you are an unrepentant asshole about it, yeah, I hope she spends half a year in jail. I hope she spends like the full, how much is it? 270 days in jail between the three charges? Because like that's nuts. That is an obscene level of like disregard for a child's well-being, and absolutely disregards the fact that other people were around as well.
Now, already you've probably noticed the problem here. What this law is intended to outlaw, very clearly, is behavior that's so disruptive that it causes an unreasonable disruption.
Screaming at a child on a playground racial obscenities would rise to that level, man.
To other people's lives. So, for example, if you're playing loud music at a party at 2 a.m. and people can't...
Man, that's so crazy. That's exactly the example given on Sheridan and Dulles, PA attorneys at law. It's so weird that he didn't read the third example in that result about publicly using abusive language towards someone in a way that incites them to respond with aggression, shouting in a way that disturbs other diners, because that would also apply here, other park goers. And it can happen on public or private property. Weird how he selected one of the examples and not the other.
Can't sleep, then that would qualify as noisy behavior that disturbs others and breaches the peace. Along the same lines, if you block the doorway of a building and tell everyone that they'll have to fight you if they want to enter, then you could be accused of alarming others and provoking an assault. So those would be reasonable examples of disorderly conduct under this law and under.
Well, the great part about our legal system, Matt, is that she gets to go to court and argue that she had completely reasonable conduct when she called that 8-year-old child the N-word in a public park, and then doubled down when asked about it and said it again.
Really any law that deals with disorderly conduct. What happened in this case is that after the Somalis and liberal women of Rochester saw the viral video, they went looking through the law to find some way to charge Shiloh Hendricks. And
well, also, there were people there who filed police reports. They're the people who are listed in the charges. That's why there are 3 different charges, Matt.
Then they deliberately interpreted this particular law in a highly literal and frankly demented manner. They saw the words offensive
in a highly literal manner, i.e., based on the statute of the law. Oh man, you interpreted the law literally. You were supposed to imagine that it didn't apply to the racist white lady. What the hell?
language and thought they had a case. But the problem is that this law, like every other law, is subordinate to the U.S. Constitution. You cannot read any law in such a way as to conflict with the Constitution. As applied to Shiloh Hendricks, that's clearly what they're doing here. Shiloh Hendricks did not disrupt anybody's life. She didn't cause a breach of the peace.
She did. There were other children on the playground. There were other parents around there. She was screaming racial slurs at children in a public park on a playground. Like, I'm sorry. If you think that didn't disrupt the peace, I would encourage you to go and try it. Go, Matt Walsh, my challenge to you. If screaming racial slurs at children on a playground isn't disrupting the peace, I encourage you, join the Shiloh Hendrix protests by going to your local park and screaming racial slurs at children, following them around. And I'm sure if your hypothesis is correct, no one will have an issue with that. No other person will have an issue with that. It'll be totally fine. And they definitely won't also press charges against you. Except you're not going to do that because you know that that is fucking insane behavior.
There's no evidence that anybody was unreasonably alarmed by her actions in that park. No one felt that their physical safety was in jeopardy because of Shiloh Hendricks. And she didn't go to the park.
Why would you assume that? If I see someone chasing a child in a park and calling them a racial slur, I'm absolutely going to assume that they are a threat to public safety. Like if I'm packing, if I have a weapon, I'm clutching that weapon and keeping a really close eye on what they're doing because they are being extraordinarily unsafe around children. Is he claiming freedom of speech yet? He's claimed it so many times.
Park with the intention of causing any kind of disruption. She responded to the fact that a Somali child had stolen her property and then ran away with it. And she may have responded in a way verbally that was offensive to people, but you're allowed to do that. Free speech.
But also, there are conduct laws for being in public. For example, I'm sure Matt Walsh is fine with there being public decency standards for mandating people have clothing on when they go outside in their public parks. I'm sure Matt Walsh agrees with public decency standards that would be upheld by the law to some degree. Where that line is, I'm not sure where he would put it. But I don't think, I'm just saying, Matt Walsh absolutely agrees with controlling speech via the law. He just thinks it's okay to say the N-word.
Literally speech. She was saying something. She was expressing a point of view that you might not agree with and you find offensive, but if that's not free speech, then free speech doesn't exist. Really.
Well, Matt Walsh, the same argument would apply, right, to playing your music very loudly at 2:00 in the morning, right? That's speech. It's loud speech, but it's speech. Why the government is allowed to intervene and impose a punishment on that because it's disrupting other people. That's how that works, right? And if free speech doesn't protect the person who's using their freedom to play music loudly and that music is just conveying words, free speech doesn't protect them from disorderly conduct violations. The same way free speech doesn't protect someone from, say, being charged as a public nuisance for chasing children around a park, calling them racial slurs.
It is that simple. If saying the N-word in the park is not free speech, then we don't have free speech.
Matt Walsh, put your money where your mouth is. Do it right now. I want you to I want you to film a Daily Wire video on your channel demonstrating your freedom of speech.
And this whole point is actually confirmed in the text of the complaint. So let's put that on the screen here. And as you can see, it states that a man identified as SHJ was in the park with his 3 children. One of them, YJ, is 8 years old and autistic. The man, SHJ, told police that his son approached a diaper bag that belonged to someone else, and he took an applesauce pouch from the bag. And then YJ climbed the playground equipment in an attempt to get away from his father and from the defendant. It was only at that point, according to the complaint, that defendant became very angry and shouted and repeatedly used a racial epithet. The rest of the complaint simply describes the video that we've already seen.
I think we can end it here. There's like 5 more minutes of this. And frankly, I expect all of it to just be the same racist, dog shit we've already debunked. Like, I don't want to spend another 5 minutes just being, like, blisteringly angry, with no additional, like, insight to share. But this is pretty disgusting. This is disgusting to an extreme degree. And of course, Matt Walsh isn't going to say it, but, like, we all know he wants to say it. I really just wanted to cover this because I'm from Minnesota. I cover issues in Minnesota, and Matt's just full of shit. He's just full of shit on this one. And like every part of his discussion of this is full of shit. Every single part. And like, genuinely, I don't know why people give this man the time of day. He's a radio shock jock who like hosted Nazi diaper wrestling, who's worn the Confederate flag and like burned books on camera. Like, he's genuinely just a hateful monster. I think we did a good enough job mocking and belittling his insane positions that I think we can call it quits here.
Riverboat Jack is coming to town. All the viewers gather around. Twitch and YouTube and swishy streams. All that content is bursting the seams. Politics, being and plenty more. Your sense of fashion you'll adore. So grab your stuff and hop aboard. We're going straight to Jack's Discord. Riverboat.